learn how to overcome resistance. We're all going to have resistance among our employees. So how do we dance with them rather than wrestle? Okay. With some employees, that might be kind of a good image. With others, that might not be. Developing yourself as a professional is very important to you. Am I going to use that to my advantage as your manager? Am I going to plug into that? You bet I am. Okay, I'm going to give you as much professional development as I can. For you, money means much more to you. I'm going to motivate you through some incentives, monetary incentives, wherever I can, wherever the budget allows. But you know what, surprising as it is, some of the research out there says that money doesn't motivate employees as much as we think it does. The intangibles really motivate people more so than the money. So, yes, we find out what motivates each individual, and then we find out how we can give that to that individual employee. Let's say I see an employee in my department who it means a whole lot to them to have camaraderie, common mutual goals on their team. Okay? And I see that they're acting in ways that don't show that. They're acting opposite of that. I will confront that individual through motivational enhancement and motivational psychology by saying, I see you doing X. It seems to me that it's important for you to do Y. So I see a disconnect. How can I help you get closer to, this X? Whether that's having mutual goals and working toward them, or whatever it is that's important to them, whether that be that professional development. So for example, an employee comes to me and has all these complaints. Okay, then you ask the individual, what would you like to do about that? And because if you were just talking about the negative and what's wrong, you're just griping, you're complaining. Let's talk about some solutions. Have you thought about what you might do? Well, you're the manager. You might see that on an employee, from an employee. You might have that kind of response. And then your response would be, well, let's put our heads together and think about this. Have you thought about, you could, throw out a suggestion there. Or just some preliminary thoughts, just encourage them to come up with them on their own. What have you thought about doing about this? Okay, so that way the employee is coming up with the solutions, and with their having that much input, there's more commitment, there's more follow through, I should say, more cooperation. In any way that you can, you try to let the employee come up with the solution so that you're basically just a facilitator. Okay? We may have leader, director, or supervisor as a title, but really we're more like a facilitator, and again, a coach. Because what happens with any relationship when you argue and you hold steadfast to your stance?
Nothing gets accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
So there's spinning and no
wheels spinning, people are digging in heels. What else happens?
Anger.
Animosity, yes. Anger. There might be some sabotage behind the scenes that happens. You might have some refusal to cooperate and some insidious behaviors like behind the back, backbiting and gossip and all kinds of things like productivity slowdowns. That will happen. What can we do to get around that? Now, if I'm saying roll with the resistance, avoid arguing, what might we want to do instead? Think about in your relationships on the outside, in your personal relationships. What do you try to do with an individual? You've got a conflict and you avoid arguing.
Compromise.
So cooperation will be obtained through negotiation, accommodation, compromise. Also, okay, if I give in a little bit on this one, would you give in a little bit on this contingency? So if I give a little here, would you give a little there? That's compromise. Every person does a little give and take so that they meet in the middle and approach a 50-50 win-win as much as possible. You notice that when somebody comes disgruntled to you, like I don't know if any of you have ever worked in customer service, and you have people coming to you with complaints, if you say, you know what, I would agree with you, And I would feel that same way if I were you. I don't blame you. What does it do? It takes the wind right out of their sails, right? How do they argue with that, right? So basically, if you reflect onto them like a mirror and a tape recorder, their message, but in your own words, you're kind of empathizing with them at the same time, not agreeing or disagreeing, really. It's kind of like throwing a ball into the fog. You know, you don't really know where it's going, but you know that there's no resistance. And the lack of resistance is what matters. So if you can paraphrase in your own words what the person is saying, capturing the essence of their message, capturing the feelings, they're going to be much more cooperative. They're going to feel heard and understood, right? And they feel a lack of, well, I don't know how I could even argue with that. So the argument piece of the conversation kind of melts away.